Godin, we have a problem.
What is it?
A Rathalos has been spotted.
Oh, him? He's not a problem.
No, it's a different kind of Rathalos.
Oh, you mean the Guardian Rathalos?
No, one of the other different kinds of Rathalos.
How many Rathalos are there?
Ladies, gentlemen, and
Rathalos of all ages. While the monster on the actual logo for Monster Hunter 1 may have been a Rathian, it is very well known that the monster that most represents Monster Hunter as a series as a whole is Rathalos. He is the series-wide flagship monster essentially, and I'm not saying that he should lose some weight, but over the years, Capcom have repeatedly shown their love for this monster, not only including the base version of it in every single Monster Hunter game that has ever been made, something that, at this precise moment, is only shared by Rathian, who is also herself a very closely related species. Even aside from that, as the Monster Hunter games have expanded the way that they create monsters, things like subspecies, rare species, variants, deviants, apex monsters, burst species, pretty much every monster modifier that has ever existed for Monster Hunter has had one given to Rathalos for them, and in some cases Rathalos has gotten exclusive variations that no other monster has as well, and this makes Rathalos by far the monster with the most different versions in Monster Hunter, and he's even gotten another new one now in Monster Hunter Wilds, which is why we're going through this rodeo again. Think of this video as being the equivalent of Rathalos itself. Every time they add a new Rathalos, I'm going to make a new Rathalos tier list, and each time it's going to get slightly less coherent. That said, some people love that there are a billion different Rathalos, some people are sick of seeing Rathalos around. Today I'm not here to say whether it's right or wrong that there are 13 different kinds of Rathalos. I'm here to say, holy crap, there are 13 different kinds of Rathalos! And then of course go through each one while giving you my opinion in tier list format, which of course means that the list will be objectively correct and you are not allowed to disagree with me ever again. That said, let's start with the OR, Original Rathalos, and he obviously has to go into the S tier. This is a tier list comparing the various Rathalos versions to each other to discuss which ones I like and which ones I don't like, and of course in that context, all comparisons have to be made to the main Rathalos himself. He is a classic and he's extremely impactful. I've always said that I felt his design was sort of like classic fantasy dragon with a few twists, but the twists that were done were very well chosen. The uniqueness that he has compared to standard fantasy dragons is in itself what has made him such a great draw for the series to bring players in. He's just such a good monster to dip people's toes into the waters of monster creativity, starting them off with something a bit more believable before you get into the craziness of some of my personal favorites like Zamtrios or Duramboros. He looks great as a monster, and he always has, and while his early generation fights involved a lot of flying around and ignoring you that I found annoying, his more modern versions are just generally solid Monster Hunter combat that I always enjoy, and of course he gets to be put into the S tier no matter what, just because of the impact that he has as a Rathalos on the series, and of course on the fact that none of these other monsters on the list would exist if it wasn't for Rathalos himself to begin with. Next up then, we've got Azure Rathalos down in the D tier. I don't like that Azure Rathalos is just a blue Rathalos that flies more frequently, partially because the thing that I like least about fighting regular Rathalos is the amount it already flies. So amplifying that part of it just makes it more of a nuisance to me. That said, while I stand by that being a logical statement, the real reason he's this far down for me is just that I personally had one traumatic quest against an Azure Rathalos like years and years ago doing an arena quest, and I believe it was base Monster Hunter World, where I died all 9 times that are available in that quest. I fully failed an arena quest with 9 carts completely. It was agonizing. And of course, I was just playing badly and getting tilted, and that's how I died 9 times, but I still had a terrible time, and that has stuck with me to this day. And the worst part is that it wasn't even like on camera for other people's enjoyment. People didn't get to laugh at me. I was just doing that on my own time for fun. If, you can call that fun. After that, then let's talk about Silver Rathalos up in the A tier. I have always liked Silver Rathalos. He does fly a bit more than normal Rathalos, but it feels more reasonable than what Azure Rathalos is. His modern versions have really just been fun to fight in my opinion, and feel like a natural upgrade to the normal Rathalos fight. I think my favorite version of Silver Rathalos was the Iceborne version of him. Not to say that I didn't like the Sunbreak one, but the Sunbreak one felt relatively in line with how flashy a lot of other higher higher tier monsters were in that game. Whereas in Iceborne, with the whole glowy chest and everything, it really made Silver Rathalos stand out as a larger threat than a lot of the monsters in the game. In his original older generation versions, he was very much like Zerureusu in that most of his changes were based around flying more, but the more modern versions of Silver Rathalos have focused more on the enhanced fire than enhanced flying, and that has definitely been for the better in my opinion. Moving on then, let's talk about Dreadking Rathalos, who is his deviant version. I placed this in the A tier as well. I've always thought that this version of the monster looks great compared to normal Rathalos. I like the deeper sort of crimson red coloring compared to the paler, brighter normal Rathalos color, and the wing pattern shape and coloring is lovely as well, very bright and vibrant. Past the visuals, however, he has some different fireballs that are mechanically way more interesting, and rather than exploding instantly, they have like a fuse timer before they blow up in a larger radius. And generally speaking, I think this is just a really good example of a monster variation that amplifies what the base monster already was. It has the same general aesthetic, but a bit more vibrantly colored, and with more contrast, and the same ideas behind the fight, but with a really cool twist added on top of it. Following that, I want to quickly stop on Apex Rathalos from Monster Hunter Rise, who I have in the C tier. I don't think it's an objectively bad monster or design, but it, along with the other Rise Apexes, were essentially just a pale imitation of their deviants, being Dreadking Rathalos. He had a few attacks that paid homage to Dreadking, but in general his moveset was less interesting than Dreadking, and he used the cool mechanics less often than Dreadking, and of course visually he just sort of had that generic Apex look, which again isn't necessarily bad, but in comparison to the brightness and the eye-popping aesthetic of Dreadking Rathalos, it just feels like a total downgrade to me. And while in a vacuum, maybe without Dreadking ever existing, I could say that Apex Rathalos would be cool, but when comparing them against each other, it just sort of makes Apex Rathalos quite sad, in my opinion. Then let's move to spin-off versions of Rathalos, starting with Ratha from Monster Hunter Stories 1 in the B tier. Technically, this isn't a unique species in any way, it's just a Rathalos that we grow from an egg and had a specific name. And it had important story significance in that game, so I still felt that it should have some sort of spot on the list, and so the B tier felt like the perfect place for this is just a normal Rathalos, but of course not with the same impactfulness of literal normal Rathalos. On a similar note, we have Greater Rathalos from the live-action Monster Hunter movie, who I also just have in the B tier for being fairly average. I won't be showing any clips from the movie because they do not like when you show their clips, but this one is essentially just Rathalos but bigger, and I generally do like bigger monsters, which does give it slight extra points, but that just offsets the points that it loses in the first place from the fact it comes from the live-action Monster Hunter movie that the majority of the fanbase would rather forget exists to begin with. Then I want to stop off in Monster Hunter Stories 2 for Raisewing Ratha, who I have in the A tier. There have been 2 Monster Hunter Stories games so far, and yet this was the second time they used a Rathalos as a protagonist in a Stories game. But this one was at least a new version of Rathalos rather than just a standard Rathalos. At the start of Stories 2, Raisewing Ratha just seems to be a Rathalos that cannot fly, which is interesting, of course, but as you progress through the game, you realize that not only can it fly, but it's actually one of the most potentially terrifying versions of Rathalos in the entire Monster Hunter universe. There are legends of the past where this species could destroy the entire world with a singular beat of its wings, but of course, as it is a stories game, through the power of friendship, we help contain this dangerous power, and we keep the Rathalos from doing anything too crazy, but there are still moments within the story where you can see its true power potential, and you see its insane visual shifts in the moveset that it could have, and it looks incredible. I've always said it would be really cool if Raisewing Rathalos was added as like a crossover collaboration monster between Monster Hunter and, you know, Monster Hunter, if they put it in the mainline series as an actual fightable creature. It would be really cool to me because Raisewing Ratha is way more awesome than the average Rathalos. But I think that it's also, of course, not quite as impactful as the OG and not quite as cool as the ones that I have in the higher up tiers. Then we've got our first Rathalos variation from Monster Hunter Explore, one of the lesser known spin-off games of the series. But this one had Flame Rathalos, who I have in the A tier. This version of the monster was essentially just like permanently on fire, literally flame Rathalos, like the biblical concept of hell in monster form. He's got a lot brighter scales in general, and his physical attacks also apply fire blight because he's, well, on fire, and they can't apply poison with his talons anymore because they apply fire, because they're on fire. This one is on the simple side for sure. They literally took a Rathalos and lit it on fire, but I think it's aesthetically quite cool, and so it gets to be slightly above the median tier. Next up is our second Rathalos variation from Explore. Yes, it's a spin-off game that got two different whole new Rathalos, and this one was Destruction Wyvern Rathalos, who I have in the B tier. This is an especially interesting one because it's also a collaboration or crossover monster being connected to the fairy tale anime. It can use the earth element, which is unique to Explore. It has beam attacks, and it just sort of has an all-around crazy visual to it too. I enjoy different aspects of this one, but it's definitely way over the top, and there's a reason for that because it's a collaboration creature from a very over the top anime. But it definitely does knock it down a little bit of a peg in my personal view in comparison to the other Rathalos because it just sort of doesn't fit the vibe of the game that it comes from. Being over the top in an over the top game is acceptable, but it just doesn't quite fit in with the rest of the vibe of Explore as far as I'm concerned. And now we come to the real crazy part of this, which are the Rathalos variations from Monster Hunter Frontier over all the years of that game, starting with Zenith Rathalos in the S tier. The Zenith species of Frontier were essentially their excuse to make absolutely insane variations of existing beloved monsters. His wing spikes were absolutely gigantic, they jutted out in unpredictable directions, his eye color was changed to a bright green, and he had a lovely blight called Extreme Fire Blight, which was unique to Frontier. Similar to regular Fire Blight, Extreme Fire Blight reduces your health over time, but Extreme Fire Blight also reduces your maximum health every time that it takes 2, not just your current health. And that happening even once or twice is enough to completely mess up your hunt and end up with you getting one shot. And I really love the extra pressure added from Extreme Fire Blight over regular Fire Blight because of the way it changes the way they can balance the fight as a whole. They can make the actual damage of individual attacks much lower because the whole danger is the fire repeatedly lowering your maximum health until you get one shot by these otherwise smaller attacks. As well, he of course has a bunch of new attacks like Flaming Tornadoes, Pillars of Flame, or even just the ability to basically throw fire at you with his wings. It's just Rathalos turned up to like 13 out of 10 basically, and it's awesome. And unlike Destruction Wyvern Rathalos, Zenith Rathalos is not at all out of place among the other Zenith monsters in Frontier by any means. It fits in. Then we have Zerureusu, which is the burst species of Rathalos in Monster Hunter Frontier, and I love how unique this one is, which is why it's also in the S tier. This is like a futuristic, almost sci-fi Rathalos, crystals growing out of his wings instead of the normal spikes, the wing pattern itself being very rigid and almost man-made looking. In fact, he almost looks like a gaming PC in monster form, honestly. His main uniqueness is that he utilizes the light element as his main form of combat, and he realizes this with a lot of just like sort of beam of light attacks, and he can even call beams of light down from the sky rather than them coming directly from his own body. And it's absolutely one of the most vicious versions of Rathalos that we have in the series. But it gets even crazier because our final Frontier entry monster is Sparkling Zerureusu, who is also in the S tier, which is the extreme burst species of Rathalos. And yes, I know that monster variations got a little bit obtuse in the later stages of Frontier, as they just sort of made a variation of a variation of a variation of a monster, but as far as this one, it had the same general aesthetic as Zerureusu, but except the blue glow was replaced with a very pinkish red glow. The crystals were way more overgrown, they were much larger, and essentially the whole moveset is just pushed into the extreme in every way possible on something that was already pretty over the top. It's got massive damage, massive area of effect attacks everywhere, hitting every hunter at the same time from a mile away. And this thing is just so out of the realm of a normal, regular, just Rathalos, it feels impossible to look at this thing and find the dots to connect back to the base, regular flying wyvern. But that's sort of the real interesting part of this conversation in this kind of video, is that as we get more versions of Rathalos and more over-the-top versions as well, we are pretty much at the point where we can have a full Monster Hunter game that is just every legendary version of Rathalos and no other monsters. It would of course feel a little bit empty compared to something like Wild, sure, but you could do it and you would have a reasonable difficulty progression throughout. You would have everything from weak starting fight Rathalos to big endgame final boss sparkling Zerureusu Rathalos, who is just absolutely insane in comparison. And then of course our final Rathalos for this is the newest one as well, Guardian Rathalos from Monster Hunter Wilds, who I also have in the S tier. I love the Guardian monsters in Wilds as a concept, and Guardian Rathalos had one of the coolest intros of any monster in Wilds, which did have quite a few incredibly cool intros as well to compare that to. Aside from that, of course, I think this is honestly just a really fun Rathalos version. The fight focuses a lot more on the sort of foot-based claw attacks than most Rathalos do. He makes the Wilk with his claws, then he can explode the Wilk with his fireballs, which is a really fun just sort of natural synergy between his attacks that makes the fight even more intriguing and interesting than most other Rathalos versions, and I find him to be one of the most interesting Guardians as well. He isn't insanely over the top like the Frontier Rathalos, but he has quite a bit of uniqueness going on, and I appreciate that even with the subtlety that he has in comparison, not to mention that he does just look generally good with the Guardian visuals of the glow lines through the body and the soulless empty eyes as well. And I know that I said that that one was the final one, but there is one more because this is specifically my tier list and no one else's, and that final monster then is Laoshan Lung in the S+ tier as the best Rathalos of all. Now, a quick disclaimer before someone misunderstands the sarcasm here and thinks that what I just said was a fact. Laoshan Lung is a completely separate species from Rathalos with no confirmed relation in the slightest. That said, Laoshan Lung is undoubtedly and undeniably just an old man Rathalos. He's just a really big Rathalos that got really old and his wings like fell off or something when he wasn't looking, and now he's just walking around really slowly because he's trying to find his wings so he can fly again, I guess. That's my headcanon for Lao, okay? It makes him a lot more interesting, it makes me like him a lot more, so much so that he's my S+ tier Rathalos. And you can disagree with me all you want, but it's my list, so it's my choice. That does it for today then, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this roundup and ranking of every Rathalos in the Monster Hunter series, and I hope you are ready to enjoy even more Rathalos in the future, with the knowledge that if they ever add in another Rathalos, this tier list will be made again, as it is tradition. And of course, feel free to tell me your favorite Rathalos down in the comments too, whether it be a confirmed Rathalos or just one that you think is a Rathalos through your own headcanon like me. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world our stage. Goodbye.